Hello, this is Sam Electric Ghost. So we have Eleni C on.
Hey.
Hi. So you can hear me good.
Yeah, I can hear you really clearly.
Great, great. So I want to give a little brief intro. I'm Sam Electric Ghost. I am a musician and producer from the U.S. and I've been interviewing indie artists around the world since 2018, and we've got over 20,000 listeners worldwide so far since 2018. And we're glad to have you on the show.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I was reading your biography on your Spotify, and it said that you have been you were chosen to represent the UK at the International Music Festival with your original song "Leap of Faith."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I done that a couple of years ago. It was in Cyprus, and it was such an amazing experience. And luckily, I won Best Female Vocalist and Best Song.
hmm And then you did a European tour, and you basically have a bunch of singles out right now. Um, So the songs I've seen that you're on your Spotify right now are like "I Don't Give a Damn" and "One Last Time." Those are the 2019 releases, right?
Yeah, they are.
Now, "Building Castles," what year is that from?
Oh God, Building Castles. Building Castles, I believe, is 2016.
Okay, so there was a little gap between "Building Castles," at least on your Spotify. Um,
Yeah, there was a big gap because basically when I first started out like with music, I was kind of into like ballads and like mid-tempo songs, but within the past like year or two, let's just say I've kind of had a rediscovery of my style.
mm-hmm.
So that's why it's kind of taken me so long to release new music, because I thought I needed to kind of take time out to figure out exactly kind of where I wanted to go and what kind of artist I wanted to be.
Yeah,
And
because I mean, yeah, it seems like you're integrating like Latin and ethnic undertones.
yeah,
So yeah, so that seems like, is that the change you did from the original song you did?
yeah, I've kind of infused more like of a Latin vibe and more of an upbeat kind of tempo into all of my songs, because I just kind of found that, I don't know, I seem to work well with more like upbeat songs. And because I started to listen to artists like Maluma and Becky G, I just felt a lot more inspired to kind of go down that road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's always interesting rhythmically when you do more complicated rhythmic patterns. I'm an African American, so you know, we have the whole tradition of the blues and reggae and Caribbean and African music. They have somewhat complicated rhythm structures, and jazz is like the American art form is a little bit more intense, and I kind of lean toward like Sun Ra and Davis and Coltrane, just because if you're going to play keyboards or play an instrument, if you get driven by those things, you have a wide open palette. you
That's
know
so true. That's so true.
that you're not stuck. Now, I mean, you could do Motown style, and there's lots of things you could do with that. You don't run out of things you could do with that. All different directions you could go. But if you open yourself up to jazz and classical and everything and reggae, you give yourself more like a palette. Like, I think people are kind of like sound painters, and so the more
Yeah, and also it's also like genres which are kind of timeless. They never get old.
definitely, yeah, because there's so much history in Latin music and Caribbean music. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of great artists that people might not know, and you can kind of pull
Yeah.
from that and then bring some really interesting things, and it gives you a little bit of an edge if you're pulling some classic
Yeah.
stuff and it's not sampled. It's just knowing the structures that are out there, and then maybe they're not heard as much anymore, and so then you can kind of you know leverage it.
Exactly. And I just think like with music like that, it's such feel good music. And I feel that like in the times that we're living in now, I just feel that people are more inclined to listen to music which like makes them feel good.
Yeah, because there's so many dark things happening today that doing something like reggae always enlightens people because of the place it comes from. And Latin
Exactly.
music has the same kind of thing going on where anything that has, funk does too. Like I'm a big person into like funk bands like Sly, Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic, James Brown, and you can use funk and you can be political with it, but you can still dance to it. So you could say something
Exactly.
important, but also still have people groove to it.
Exactly. That's the thing. Sometimes it's just nice to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, sometimes you just want to party and you just want to do like, like a 1999 song or a Sly and the Family, or just to get on the good foot. That's just,
Yeah.
happy. It gets you moving. But just doing it sometimes is
100%.
political and just doing it.
Very, very true.
um, yeah, so we like to talk to artists about like where they started, and so we usually have a whole set of questions. But since you had a bunch of stuff that was out there that I wanted to talk about, we kind of put it out there. I usually ask people like, when did you first get into music and like what age?
Do you know what? It's probably like really cliche, but music has kind of always been in me from a child. Like I used to be that typical child where I'd be like in my bedroom, like dancing around to like either Jennifer Lopez or a Britney Spears number with my hair brushed, pretending that I was
Mm-hmm.
them. And then I would say probably I was about 12 when I started taking like singing lessons, just kind of for fun because I enjoyed it. And I kind of started to develop myself as an artist probably around about the age of like 16, where I started to consider, you know, what it would be like to have my own songs. And yeah, and just literally from there, I've kind of been doing music for so many years, but like now has been the time where I've kind of got like a writing partner who I write everything with, and we just tend to kind of collaborate with other songwriters, other DJs, producers, because it's just always nice to work with like new people, because sometimes you get given like a fresh idea that you never would have thought of, or a fresh beat or a fresh lyric.
So the other question I have is like, you realize pretty early you had a talent for music, but then there's a lot of people that get into music, but they don't actually write their own music. They don't become like a singer songwriter or a pop star. So when did you decide that you actually had music that you wanted to actually do your own music?
That I would probably say that's with my newest stuff, because all my old stuff I didn't write. I had a writer who done them all for me. And then kind of developing like my new style, I decided to still work with the same songwriter, and we kind of became like a duo.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of gone on a journey of writing like these new songs, and it seems to be working.
That's interesting because I find a lot of times that singer songwriters they get to a point where they might have been working as just a vocalist, or they might have been in a band and they might have been just a bass player or just a guitarist or a piano player, and then suddenly decide, I've got my own material and I've got my own vision. And I've always, I like to interview people who are kind of going that way, because I always find it very
Yeah,
interesting when you get a singer songwriter or somebody that works, that has a bigger part of their image is part of like their idea. I would always think that's very interesting, because I always look at it like musicians can be like, people who write novels. Because when you're a singer songwriter, you get a kind of window into that person's character, and then it has a unique spin, and it usually is very satisfying when you listen to people who are in, artists that do that. So I'm always like very drawn toward people who do that.
because you know what, like being creative, writing songs is like it is a talent. Um, being able to be creative is a talent, and for me, I'm not gonna lie, but my I wouldn't say that my greatest strength lies in songwriting. That's why I work with my songwriter, because I feel that sometimes like I can have an idea of what I want a song to be about, but I might not necessarily be able to write it how I want it to come
Mm-hmm.
across. So working with other people has helped me to kind of explore an idea and develop like my sense of writing and my sense of style.
Yeah. I think that's still, it's still cool that actually that you have a part of it. You like, you're saying that you're in a duo, so you're feeling that you have, like, you're not just taking somebody's song and singing it. So you have like ideas, right, that you're actually working with, and maybe having a professional songwriter that's their talent, kind of. So maybe you can kind of give us an example from your new songs, how they came about, and like how much of it came from your idea and then the working together. Can I always like find, I like, very interesting to talk to musicians and find out how they actually got to the song.
So for example, with my first single, One Last Time, it's basically like all about how when you're in love with someone and you give them chance after chance to kind of, take your relationship to the next level, to kind of make it official and say, do you know what, we're going to be together and we'll see how this
Mm-hmm.
goes. But when you're always in that predicament where you just never kind of get to that point, One Last Time is all about saying, do you know what, I love you, I want to be with you, I'm going to give us one last chance to see if we can make this work.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. Like, I'm literally not gonna open the door again. This is the last time. And this song came about because I tend to get like ideas and inspiration. I draw them from obviously like my own life, but also from other people's lives, like stories that my friends might come and say to me, or things that I read.
Mm-hmm.
And One Last Time came to me because I had like a friend who was in the exact predicament, and I went to my songwriting partner, and I said to her, "Do you know what? Like, I've got this situation, and I really want to write about it. I kind of want to make a song about it." So then we like hooked up with my producer, and we went to him with the idea, and then he kind of like developed a melody, and then we were like, actually, do you know what, yeah, this melody, this is the melody that we kind of want to go down, like this actually represents like the flavor that we want the song to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we heard that, the lyrics kind of like my lyric partner Estir kind of came up with like the hook line.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, well, let's go with One Last Time, like, because that's basically what you're trying to say. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm giving this one last time. And then yeah, and then from her hook line, like, I was like, oh, maybe we should like put this in. And then she was like, yeah, and then we can write this, and then it just kind of like all developed.
So you like, a lot of times I talk to, like, bands that are like a four-piece band, get like a guitar player, bass player, drummer, vocalist, and sometimes like they get into the studio and they bounce the ideas. Like the drummer might have the drum beat, the bass player might have the bass
Yeah,
line, and then suddenly, the singer hears a groove and then comes up with the melody or comes up with the hook. So it's a
yeah.
very collaborative effort, but today it's kind of hard because a lot of people are in home studios. The band might not be in the same room. So this collaboration you're talking about, were you actually physically all together, or were you doing it like online, where you're all in the
No,
same room?
we were yeah, we were literally all physically in the same room, locked in the same room for 6 hours straight.
I think that's a good way to do
And
it. That's kind of old school, but that's, I think, a really good way to write.
do you know what, it's a really good way to write. And a lot of the time, like, I always get asked, like, so how long does it take you to like write a song and go from that to kind of having a final song? Like, what's the recipe? And I always say there is no one recipe. When it comes to writing a song, you can never judge how long it's going to take you or what you're going to come up with, because it's a creative process. Like, this song came to us within that 6 hours. My second single took over like 4 hour sessions, and now the song that I'm working on now, we've done like 4 hour sessions on it, and we're still not finished.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's what,
every artist has a different story on how they do it. I mean, some artists, they just have a vision and it just comes to them. You know, some artists kind of do something that takes them hours or days or weeks or months to do something. You never really know. I mean, I know some artists, they have to do jam sessions. You know, like rock bands, they'll do a jam, they'll run the tape for a couple hours, then go back and listen to the tape and then pull the hooks out. And then that's a classic way of doing it.
Exactly. That's an old school way of doing things. And you know what? Old school, like, you can learn a lot from like old school ways. And there's also like another songwriter that I know, like because she's just a songwriter, she's not a singer. She said to me that like when it comes to creating a song, like, she could literally be fast asleep and she could wake up in the middle of the night and there could be an idea in her head, and she literally has to go and write the idea down before she forgets it. I had another songwriter who was like, she tends to kind of like, she's more of like intertwined with like nature. So for her to get an idea, she kind of needs to be one with nature. So she does a lot of like hiking and a lot of like walks in the park.
Yeah.
And that's how she gets her ideas.
Yeah. It's just, you never know. I mean, today it's so many.
You never.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things, I'm a musician, but I'm a electronic musician, but I use analog synthesizers, and my analog synthesizers, after 20 years, they kind of talk to me, and I use like modular and really old-fashioned synths that are very organic, and they kind of, every time you approach them, they come up with something new. And so I have a home studio with all these hardware synths like Moogs and Prophets and Rolands. And when the sense I can play keyboard, I'll just run jam sessions and I'll just run the tape, and then I go back and I pull stuff out. That I just keep on running the tape, and I keep on running experiments, and then I go back and I find the hooks, and then I work on what I think sounds good. And kind of Neil Young used to do that. The Beatles did it. The Allman Brothers, like a lot of classic bands. Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. A lot of the bands I'm kind of coming from in terms of inspiration. But yeah, a lot of people, you know, they use like Pro Tools, or they can build a whole song like on a you know, a DAW. But I use my hardware sense to kind of drive performance, and I'll do late Facebook Live performances from my studio, and then kind of see what the fans think of what I did, and then pull out the hooks. so today you can do a lot of cool things where you can kind of put an idea out and get immediate feedback from the social media.
Social media is insane how it's developed over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I used to have to get the whole band and then go to a club and play and then see if anybody liked it, or, you know, have a session in a basement. Now I can actually do a live session and hit like 3,000 people on Facebook Live in a night, and, you know, and get immediate feedback, which is like.
And the best thing is just that it's from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, because you build your home studio, and now you can actually send out and see people in Berlin listening, people in Tokyo, people in London. You're like, wow, it's like you could reach so many people. And, you know, that's what this whole podcast is. But I mean, I've talked to bands in Denmark, in Berlin, you know, Canada, you know, like I'm getting ready to talk to a band in South Africa in a couple of weeks. So it's like you just can reach people. You never could have done that back in the day when I started, you know, in the late 70s. You had to go to some club and play covers.
Yeah. Know? The famous covers.
Yeah, to play Freebird.
Oh God, I remember back in the day was when I first started doing gigs back when I was 16. It was like I had to basically do like a set which was practically all covers, and like I could chuck in like 1 or 2 originals in like 10 songs, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I want to be here singing my own song.
Yeah, that's always been my whole goal, is like, you know, I'm not playing covers. You know, and I've been lucky. I can go to New York and Boston, kind of close to those places, and there's tons of clubs that still want bands to play original stuff. Um, and so
Yeah.
then those environments in New York City and Boston, you can get into a club, maybe 300-400 seat club, and play original material. And
Oh, that's
and that
amazing.
is like, to me, like if you're a performing musician, that's what you want, to be able to do. And so, yeah, have you played live gigs in what you're doing? Or are you primarily like on Spotify and all the social networks, or you do live gigs?
No, I do live gigs. For me, live gigs is basically where my passion lies. That's the thing that I love to do the most, performing really. And I'm just in the process as well now of preparing for my first headline show in London.
So do you have a
I've done
full band, or do you run with a DJ, or how do you perform?
I tend to perform with backing tracks because I perform with dancers.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of being able to gather everybody together proves to be quite a difficult task. And because I've done shows, I've done live shows with like a live band and stuff like that, but I find that the audience, if there is a choice, they tend to prefer me to be with my dancers, I guess, because it's more kind of like visual and more interactive in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on the type of music that you're into. I mean, I see a lot of music today where, the performance aspects of it require, not using a live band. And so,
Yeah, that's the thing. My music kind of requires more dancers than it does
yeah.
live instruments, I would say.
Yeah, it's a different thing. I mean, I'm coming from like a progressive, like my bands I was into were like Genesis and Yes. And so the whole thing about the music I do is about playing a Moog or about playing a Hammond organ. Kind of like a blues guy is always going to have a guitar, you know. A rock guy
Yeah,
is always going to have a
exactly.
rock band. It's a different type of genre. But I understand, hip hop. I understand, EDM and dance music, trance. There's different genres that don't require that. But I always think it's cool to see a band actually play like an acoustic guitar and do a set that's intimate. Just because there's something about when you play an instrument that is its own
Yeah,
performance. And certain,
100% agree with you on that. There is nothing that compares with pure live music.
yeah, I mean, it's cool to have the performance aspect. And I understand when you're doing big festivals, you got to have a show. But if you can get to a small club and have somebody playing an acoustic guitar and then a really good vocalist singing with it, that's cool. Or somebody on a piano accompanying somebody, that can be very intimate and kind of jazz-like or just soulful. It can have an impact. So I've always, suggested to bands, like, always give yourself a lot of different ways to do things. Because it depends
Definitely.
on your audience. Certain audience require one thing, another audience maybe be a different thing. So you can give yourself a lot of different variations to make it interesting. But yeah, I can understand that. I've talked to like artists like Kendra Black, and she goes out, and alternates between having performance dancers with her and then sometimes full bands. Depends on the venue.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've seen that.
exactly. A more if it was kind of a more intimate venue, I would take it right. I'd probably strip it down completely and go for like the acoustic feel. Because yeah, I do love doing a good like raw acoustic set as well.
So um so when did you first start playing live? Was it back in like 2016 when your first stuff came out, or before that?
Yeah, 2016. I'd say 2016 was quite a poignant year for me because that's when I started to do like I had quite big shows. I got to perform in Birmingham Arena. I done like a fireworks event with like 15,000 people. But then prior to that, was when I represented like the UK in the international at the International Music Festival, and prior to that, I was kind of just doing a lot of like open mic nights around London. So yeah, I've been doing live performances for many years now.
Yeah, that's cool because I started out when I was in my teens, with like punk bands, like indie rock bands, like trying to be like the Replacements or REM, College radio was the big draw for me, and I've always been like, I like guys like Jimmy Page and Hendrix and that type of thing. So performance from an instrument point of view was always what I was into, but and just playing live with other guys, or other bands. Or lately, I've been able to. Like when I was in the '70s, I was always like in bands with guys, but lately I've actually collaborated with a lot of women artists. And a lot of artists that are in the indie arena. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. It's there are more female artists doing cool things than back in the day when it's like everybody was like, it was a bunch of guys. But now I actually worked with a lot of different people and a lot of women in the last like 2 years, which is pretty cool. It's not what I started doing, but the rock world has changed.
Yeah, the rock world, music in general has changed. Like it just keeps on changing.
Yeah, you get like artists like I love Tori Amos, I love Liz Phair, Juliana Hatfield. I was into those bands, but now you see even more and more, female-led artists, or groups that are doing really cool things, and somewhat more innovative than like the classic rock area, which is kind of stagnant. It hasn't gone that it hasn't really evolved. But yeah, it's interesting.
I find like rock, like Motown, like jazz, they're kind of like timeless genres. They don't really need to change, because people love that kind of music. Like even as generations grow, and like even as you see like the younger generation, they're all still touched by these kinds of genres. I find that the only one that's like constantly changing is pop, because obviously pop is like popular music and it moves with whatever's kind of current in society at that given time. But I find it quite like amazing and really nice how like jazz and like Motown music, like they're not spoiled.
No, those styles I think have so much complexity to them, and
yeah, they're just so
they're
deep.
They're pretty deep in the structure. I mean, if you look at a Motown drummer, has capabilities that no drum machine can have. If you actually listen to the drum beats on those Motown and Stax soul records, the drummers are amazing. I mean, the ability of those drummers to make beats, and that's a human being doing that beat, and they're very complicated, and they seem simple, but they're not. There's a lot of stuff going on with those, and so that's like jazz. I mean, a lot of the guys in Motown were jazz guys or blues guys, and so they brought those blues techniques into that genre. And you listen to that, a lot of those deep cuts from the Temptations or the Four Tops or Smokey, they're really sophisticated in terms of what's going on. And some of that gets lost today with all the use of drum machines. I've always kind of been a big proponent, like if you can get a real drummer, use a human drummer.
Go with the real.
Well, just because the real drummer can, if they're good, they can bring all kinds of cool techniques that, you might not be able to do that on a drum machine. There's cool things you do on a drum machine. There are innovative things you can do, but there's nothing like a real rhythm player.
No, 100%.
And that's why those genres are so, people still love them, because when they go to them, they can't really get tired of a Smokey and the Robinson in a Miracle Song or a Temptation.
No, you get a rawness.
Yeah, there's just a lot of emotion. There's a lot of depth in those songs. There's a lot of feeling. They put heart in. They actually are well written. I mean, they tell stories, and you know what's going on. It's pretty, and the voices are so good. Like the vocal capabilities of those singers are like top notch. It's kind of the era where you had to be a good vocalist to even get a contract. The people who are singing are like unbelievable in terms of the range. You got 5-octave voices. You have people who have like really good baritones, soprano voices, like really distinctive. Marvin Gaye, Martha and the Vandellas, all these great singers, just unbelievable. Eddie Kendricks, I can go on and on about these guys, but yeah, there's something about that stuff that always draws me in. You know, as a songwriter, I always look at that stuff to kind of give me a base, you know, of what to do. And then funk is like for me, like a band like Parliament Funkadelic is the basis of all hip
Yeah.
hop. Like all hip hop samples from them. You know, like
Oh wow.
and you know they did so much really good work. The 25 years that they were operating and they're still operating, they just created so many grooves. They're almost like all American hip hop, the early hip hop from the 80s and 90s. They're going to like the Chronic and Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, NWA, all those guys, you know, Public Enemy. They were all taking loops from Parliament Funkadelic songs. So and that's classic funk, and it's really technical and very, you know, it's got rock, it's got psychedelia, it's got all these things, and you know, then classic soul too. But so yeah, I think those genres always move. Is that sometimes you wait for the next big, like you never saw another Led Zeppelin or another Who or another Allman Brothers. It seems like those bands kind of there's not a lot of bands that are playing that like that. You know, you had bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden.
Yeah.
But you know, there's a company like Coldplay and U2, but they're not new. You know, where are the big bands like that? It seems like we're not in that age anymore.
Yeah, it's very true.
But you know, maybe everything turns around. So it depends on if somebody really has a love for that stuff and then shows a different angle on it. They usually happen. Nobody saw Nirvana or Kurt Cobain coming when he came. He came out of nowhere. Everybody thought that genre was gone, and then he came out. And then Eddie Vedder came with Pearl Jam, and everybody thought, that kind of punk grunge thing. They thought that was dead with the Clash, and then it came back. So you never know with music that everything kind of spins around.
100%.
So
It literally goes in the opposite direction.
And what do you think about like the future of music? Are you like integrating? You integrate like Latin music, but have you thought about integrating like hip hop or EDM or trance or into your style, any other genres?
Do you know what? I would never say never to anything. I'm currently I'm currently the way that my music's going now, but I would I would definitely welcome like adding in maybe a bit of like EDM or a bit of rap, a bit of like I would say that my new song has got a bit of like a more of an R&B feel as well to it.
Cool.
As well as having still like the Latin pop undertones, I would say that it's kind of got a bit more of an R&B feel as well. So yeah, I'm definitely open to exploring my music. I don't believe that you should box yourself in one thing. I believe that you should have like a basis of what you're about, because obviously, you don't want to alienate your fan base, but at the same time, it's always good to explore a little bit.
Yeah, if you look at an artist like David Bowie, he kind of always his audience realized that he was always going to change. He was one of these guys. He would actually be able to come out like Ziggy Stardust, and then do the Thin White Duke, and then do Aladdin Sane, and then do like all these characters. And so he kind of created a structure for himself where people kind of anticipated that he wasn't going to stay as Ziggy. That he
Yeah.
was actually going to change, and so he actually would. I mean, Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke. I mean, he went from doing hard rock to doing like writing with Luther Vandross. So it shows like a big artist like that was so really, great at crossing boundaries. I mean, he was playing with hard rockers, and then was having Luther Vandross singing on like Young Americans and stuff. So that's very adventurous. I'm always looking for artists that go that far, because I think that is really cool when an artist can do that.
Definitely. It's always good to push the boundaries.
Yeah, I think Bowie gives a really good example, I think, of how far you can go creatively. You kind of characters and have stagecraft and just the way he used to perform. And, like Freddie Mercury did the same thing. He's like a very theatrical performance.
Yeah, and then you have obviously like the king of pop, the Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he's very theatrical too, because he just grew up in a stage family that basically, since he was a kid, he was doing acting, did the Wiz. I mean, he was doing all these things where he was kind of multi-talented. He's a singer-songwriter, a dancer, an actor, and so he brought that he always had a character. His off-the-wall image, his Thriller image, Bad image. It was like every album had an image, had a stagecraft to go with it, and that's kind of some pop stars. Madonna still does that, and there's some pop stars. Lady Gaga does it. She does kind of a Bowie thing.
Exactly. Madonna, Lady Gaga, all of them.
Yeah, they all still do that. I always like to see artists to do. I think Lady Gaga is really like in a Bowie tradition, as a female kind of Bowie, maybe, doing some very theatrical stuff, which is really cool.
100%. Like Lady Gaga, when she first came out to the artist that she is now, it's completely different.
Yeah, she changes like Bowie. That I really like. I like the fact that she kind of took that on from a female side of Bowie.
Yeah, and you're always like anticipating. Like, you're always anticipating what's her next move.
Yeah, she's got her audience kind of queued up to not expect her to keep on doing the same song.
Yeah.
Which is, if you're an artist, you gotta love that, because if you're able to, I can creatively go any direction and I don't have to keep on singing my hit from 10 years ago. I don't have to keep on doing that. I can actually come out and do something different and it'll sell. I think that's a really good place to be in. If that's what you like. I mean, I think some artists, don't want to do that. They just want to keep on playing like Hotel California over and over and over again. But there's a place for that. There are bands that just want to hear, your fans that just want to hear that. That's what you do. But I think as a musician, I think it's cool to be able to grow, because as a person you grow, and you would think that an artist is going to want to do something different than what they did 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah. I like, me being a performer, like, I always love to do something new, but at the same time, like, I don't mind incorporating like one or two of like my old songs, those that I know that my audience are gonna appreciate.
Yeah.
But I love always changing up my set and adding like new songs, because it's just so refreshing.
Yeah, because you don't want to get stuck. Some bands get stuck on their greatest hit, like for the last, like a band might be, they go through a phase. The greatest hits version of themselves, and then there's like
so many.
And that's all they're doing, like a Journey. They'll keep on just playing the same songs they did in the 80s over and over again, and they're like not doing anything new. You're like, okay, well, that's where you are in your career, but that can be kind of mind-numbing.
True. I mean, like, for me, for example, like, I do love Mariah Carey, and I would love, like, if I was to go to one of her concerts, I'd love to hear her new stuff. But then also there's like old classics, which I would just die to hear, like Hero, like Make It Through the Rain. Like, these are like timeless songs for me, that I feel that when artists have like a song or a couple of songs which have been like huge successes, you kind of need to always include it in your set, because your fans appreciate the song so much that you kind of owe it to them, and you owe it to your song to keep on performing it and keeping it alive.
Yeah, Prince had to kind of deal with that, because he knew everybody wanted to hear Purple Rain. He knew everybody wanted to hear.
Like, everybody
wants to hear 1999.
That song will never die.
Yeah, everybody wants to hear 1999. They want to hear Purple Rain. They want to hear When Doves Cry. But the man had like 1,000 songs in the catalog, and he was very creative, and he wanted to move into jazz, move into all kinds of things. And so he went through phases where he did not want to do Purple Rain. And I saw shows where I actually saw Prince where he wouldn't do it. because he's like, I don't want to do that because I'm in a different place. And I respect that when he was doing it because he was in a different place. He was doing different stuff. But, he always ended up having to go back to it because his fans, on a big scale, if he wanted to make enough money, he had to do it. But, I can understand his frustration when he's like, I wrote that in the 80s and it's the 2010s and I really don't want to play it tonight. you know? But, yeah, I can understand both ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting when you're an artist, you have the obligation to your fans and then the obligation to yourself. You have to kind of balance it.
Yeah, exactly. You need to balance it in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, I think your fans sometimes, if you're in a totally different phase, they can understand you're going a different way, And if it's to the the point of what you do is like art, and if something doesn't fit with the direction you're in, you might not be able to really make it fit. But it depends on what kind of artist, how you want to handle it. Because you never know where your head's at. As an artist, you get in these different phases, you get in a different mode, and you're like, okay, I'm cool with doing the old stuff, or I'm not.
Yeah, that's very true.
And it really,
I guess it depends. I guess it depends as well, like emotionally, what it makes you feel as well. Because sometimes music can be so personal to the artist that sometimes it's just too difficult to
well, if you
of
don't have
revisit
the
the
feeling
song.
that makes that song work, right? If you feel that I'm not into this song, and if I do the performance, it's gonna be a bad performance, then you gotta like, I don't want that in my catalog of like, I'm not into that song right now, and if I do it, it's gonna be very half-hearted, and why do that?
Yeah.
And so then you kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do it. I felt like Prince was in that mode sometimes where he's like, I'm not into it, I don't feel it, I'm not gonna do it. But if he felt it and he felt good about it that night, then he would do it. It was kind of like, it depends on where he was, which I think is cool that he would do that. He was big enough that he could do it.
Yeah, he was Prince.
Yeah.
No one's gonna argue with
He's
Prince.
like, you know what? I can play guitar so good or keyboard so good that you're not gonna really care if I play Purple Rain because I got so many other songs I can play. Maybe you want to hear something from Sign of the Times. But yeah, I think it's interesting what musicians can do today. So what do you think about the way that we're able to like put out music on Spotify and all these streaming platforms compared to like in the old days? The only way you could get out is you had to have a record contract, you had to have vinyl, you had to have a tape, you had to have a CD. What do you think about that?
I personally think that it's great. I think that it makes music more accessible. The way that, for example, like I can be in a club and I'm going to hear a song that I've never heard before, and I'll just quickly take my phone out, I'll Shazam it, and automatically I find the song and I can download it from like Spotify or add it on my playlist on Apple Music. I just think that the way that music has become so much more accessible is great.
I guess the flip side of it, I've talked to some bands, they're like, well, the Spotify's and the Apple Music's, Tidal, they're kind of like radio stations, and you don't really make a lot of money from them. They get you out there, and then they give you opportunities to make money as a musician by performing, by selling merch, by merchandising, by licensing. Didn't really make a lot of money. They had to tour to make money. Because
do you know what I completely agree with that. Obviously, like we have with streaming and stuff, like the money's not as good. However, I feel that with the rise of streaming and the rise of music being so much more accessible, it's allowed independent, like unsigned artists to kind of break through without having to have like the conventional record deal and all of that.
Yeah, it gets a lot of new artists out there. There's no gate.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of it helps that independent artist to kind of break through. And sometimes it's like, you know, because obviously me being an independent artist, I get asked a lot of the time how I feel about like the streaming and stuff like that. And you know what, it has its pros and its cons, but I feel that maybe that the pros slightly outweigh the cons, because it's allowed people like me to kind of develop myself as an artist and put myself out there without having to feel pressurized by a label, or having to alter who I am in order to fit like
Yeah, I mean,
a contract that I'm obliged
yeah, the
to.
old days is like record company give you like 3 strikes. You got 3 albums to do. If they don't make it, you're done. If they give you an advance, you do your 3 albums, and it took like 3 albums, and then you found out, well, you're not gonna make it, and then you're done. And
Yeah.
but in this world, you're more independent. You can kind of drive your own career. You can drive what your image is going to be. You don't have to meet those goals of that contract. Um,
Exactly. And then you know, you can then after approach labels, and you'll have a leverage to discuss the contract. You'll have the ability to debate a contract, to kind of get a contract that you're happy with, as well as the record label, because you're going to have behind you already your own fan base, your own style that you've created,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, cause I mean, I was a SoundCloud artist, and then I got picked up to do these podcasts, and the podcast of my is a part of Spotify, so I actually get paid by Spotify to do this. And the interesting thing is, like, I'm a musician, and I'm a producer. I would love to just make all my money from doing that, but I actually make more money doing this. But
You see that? You see, that's the thing. That's what I say. You should not underestimate. Do not underestimate the power of streaming. And also, I find that with like with the streaming, and like with obviously with Spotify and stuff like that, I feel like it allows you to kind of connect with other artists as
yeah,
well, because you constantly have like the Spotify radar list,
well, your
the
playlist,
New
yeah,
Music Monday,
yeah. I mean,
New Music
well,
Friday, like
you get exposed to a lot of artists, and then like what I'm doing here with this podcast, I've talked to over 35 artists, and a couple of them I'm actually getting ready to collaborate with. And
yeah,
through this podcast, I've actually collaborated with a couple of artists, put out some material. I got a distribution deal with a record label where I was able to kind of say I'm indie. I have these followers on this show. I got like 20,000 follow me here, 80,000 on SoundCloud. But I was able to kind of show that, but I kind of wanted to do what I want, and so I can put out
yeah,
whatever I want, however I want to do it, and I just have a distribution deal. And so they don't really control what I put out. They like, as long as it's good quality, they put it out. Um, and that's exactly where I wanted to be. And it's really interesting that like I said, I make more money on my podcast than I do from my music, but I'm able to still support my music, and I still have releases coming out. So that's you can do what you want in this world in ways that you never thought you could do.
yeah. You can. You know what? As long as you've got drive, you can make it work.
Yeah, it's just interesting because right now I'm trying to put together something where I'm going to get some of the people who are on the show to actually do like a Facebook Live like concert where I'm planning in stages of having people who've been interviewed on the show to do a Facebook Live concert, and they'll do like a unplugged from their own home studio and then be on a live
Yeah,
stream. I've got like two of the artists I've talked to signed up for 2020 to do that. And so that's just like the nature of this business now, that you can go and set up something, and I'm gonna have somebody like in Sweden playing in their home studio, another person in Atlanta playing from their studio, and if I'm lucky, I'll get a band in London to do it as well. So you can do all kinds of things now, and that you would have had to have some big tour promoter do it or all this stuff, and I don't have that overhead.
exactly. And
you know
now because of like streaming, and because of things like Facebook and Instagram lives, all of this becomes so much more accessible and so easy. and it allows you to kind of build a network with people that, like, back, like, even a couple of years ago, you would never have been able to. You would
Yeah, it
have
would have
never
cost
really
you
been able to
thousands of
connect
dollars
with.
to try to book something that could get somebody in London and somebody in Sweden to be on the same feed. You could, have to pay money to do that, and I don't have to pay to do that.
Yeah.
And so I can create content and put it out there because the technology on our phones and the net has gotten so good that we have this community, and this is where you can take advantage as an artist and a producer or just a marketing person or entertainer. You're like, wow, there's all these things like tools, and a lot of them are free. And then you're like, oh, I can
Yeah.
use this free tool and I can do a concert, and then you can create a Patreon and somebody can pay you, to go and interview people. you know
Yeah.
it's like you never know. I mean, it's like, so you have all these things you can do that you start getting income streams from stuff that never was a job.
Yeah, that was never. It was never something that could even be considered.
Yeah, a job. Or a way to do anything. It's just a creative enterprise that happens to make money. And then you can keep, you have to have some way of being able to continue doing what you do. You have a day job that helps you, or you have a system that helps you, or you have free resources to help you. And, the way the net is today, the artists can do a lot of cool things. The fact that we have this app, I talk to bands all over the world. I'm talking to a band in South Africa in a couple of weeks. I've talked to somebody in
That's
Sweden
insane.
last week. you know, it's just amazing
It's
to me.
crazy. It is. It definitely is. It's just, it kind of opens up your eyes to a whole new world.
Yeah, just because again, the cool thing about this app is like, we push out to 11 platforms. We're linked to Spotify, so we can actually tie your hyperlink to your artist profile, and then people can click on your Spotify profile and actually get to your music. They could get to your YouTube profile from this podcast. If there's a hyperlink I can add, I can create a highlight on Instagram, and when you hit the highlight, it'll go right to Spotify's version of the podcast, and you'll be able to hear this podcast by just clicking on a link on a highlight on Instagram. So the integration with Instagram and Spotify is really, really powerful. It can be used to kind of push you as an artist, which a lot of people have been surprised about the level of integration and the fact that you can do that. And we don't charge. We do really long form interviews that some folks on the net charge like $100 for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And we decided that we just like to talk to artists, and we'll figure out a way to get the money on the back end. So, if you don't care about the money will come to you anyway.
That's true. That's true. You just got to keep persevering.
Yeah, well, my whole thing is I like to talk to musicians because I'm a musician and I want to hear what other people say about what they're doing. And so it's really cool that you were able to take some time to talk to us. And as you work on projects, if you do you have a full album that you're working on, or are you going to just continue to release singles?
I'm currently in the process of just like releasing singles, but they all belong to an EP which is called Broken Ice, which I'm hoping to kind of release to middle of next year.
Oh, so these singles are going to be part of like an EP that comes out in 2020?
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. The way people are, I mean, I've been releasing singles since May on my distribution contract, and I have the ability to do a record, but I'm kind of holding off on doing a record until I kind of get the vibe of like what the record should be. And I've
Yeah,
got an idea
I agree with
about
you.
what I should do, but I'm kind of like, records don't sell as well, and so I'm trying to come up with like a reason to make a record and then put the right collection of songs together to be in that record. So
I think it's nice, like at the beginning, to kind of release like a single at a time in order to get your fans engaged, and yeah, just for them to kind of understand you more as an artist. And like my aim after I release my EP is to then hopefully be able to create a whole album. But I wanted to kind of release one single at a time, because I wanted to keep giving my fans something fresh every kind of 6 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to get on the schedule.
And I wanted them to, and I just kind of wanted them to come on the journey with me, because it's literally a journey of discovery for me as well.
Yeah, it's like you gotta, like, a lot of times, like, albums have a theme. Like, I grew up with albums, classic albums going back to like Sgt. Pepper, and like the famous like albums from bands like Yes and Genesis, and rock operas like Tommy and Quadrophenia. So albums that had themes, or like Pink Floyd, The Wall. You get an album has to be like an event. It has to have a meaning. It has to kind of flow. And so
100%.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, so if you're gonna put out a record, like a lot of hip hop bands actually put out, like, Kendrick Lamar, like Butterfly, that has a theme. It seems like a lot of hip hop bands have been very successful with the album format, because they use it like the way the Beatles did. But it seems like a lot of pop bands have kind of not been able to do that in this age as much. It seems like hip hop bands have done to kind of taken that genre and kind of run with it. The traditional album format bands have not been as successful with it in this era. But there's always somebody that tries it.
I think it's very true what you said. An album needs to have like a core. It needs to have like a cohesiveness. It needs to be like a collection of one thing, because like as a singer myself and an artist, when I go to buy an album, I go to buy a collection of songs that if I put like song 1 to kind of 15 on, they're gonna all make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, like, unless I'm gonna go and buy like 2019 best-selling songs. I'm gonna go and buy an album that I want to hear a collection, like an Adele album, for example. Like, I know exactly what I'm gonna be getting. I know that it's gonna be a collection of songs that, as I play one after the other, they're all gonna fit together and they're all gonna make sense.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes back to like Sgt. Pepper's or the White Album. I mean, the Beatles put these albums together to actually really float, and they didn't necessarily have a real cohesive theme. I mean, Sgt. Pepper's doesn't necessarily have a cohesive theme, but the songs go together. It's like a psychedelic theme, but it's not as clear as something like Tommy or like Genesis concept albums or albums from Yes or stuff. But it's the start of this idea of having an album that has a theme, even though the songs aren't totally interrelated. I mean, some of them seg into the next one, and they kind of seg together because they're kind of written to kind of flow together. But the meaning is not as cohesive as something like.
Yeah.
I think like you can do an album like the way Sgt. Pepper's is, and that's like the classic way of stringing an album together. That the songs don't have to necessarily mean anything together, but they have to kind of work together.
Exactly. They need to be able to support each other.
It's the really best example, I think, of a pop band is the Beatles did that really good. They're really awesome at putting together songs that doesn't necessarily you wouldn't have thought they would be together, but when you hear them together, it just works. And that's the brilliance of their band, was they were able to take an album like a Sgt. Pepper's, or like even if you listen to Abbey Road. Abbey Road probably gets closer to being a concept because things flow together even more than Sgt. Pepper. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good roadmap for any pop artist looking at structure. Even though it's old, it's still a valid lesson.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most, like, practically the most successful artists are those back in the days. Like, even though God rest his soul, Michael Jackson's passed away now, his music will never die. The same with Prince, their music will never die. George Michael, you know, all of these artists that, you know, as artists ourselves, we need to look at them and take a leaf out of their book. The fact that they're able to still have a legacy even though they're no longer around is something which is so admirable, because nowadays, like, the career span of like new singers is so small. Like, you have an artist who could have been out last year and now in 2019 or going into 2020, you can't remember who they are. And
it's kind of like
that's kind of,
you don't have the longevity.
But then, you know what, maybe that's because we're messing with the recipe that works. You know, maybe because we're not using the same recipes that they did back in the day. Maybe that's why.
I think part of it is like actually recording like live in the studio and using like real. Road, you know, where you had to do at some of the big studios like Olympia, and you know, the bands like, you know, Hendrix and stuff, they put a lot of effort into what they did. You know, they put amazing amounts of money in budgets in gonna be somebody's gonna last a long time. It's kind of like what you put into it. When you put that much effort into something, then it tends.
You're always gonna all your work is always going to be a reflection of the amount of effort you put in, especially music.
I mean, when you're putting that level of effort, using really good equipment that makes really good sound, really good instruments, and then people giving you the budget to take like 3, 4, or 5 months to do a record, you know, it's not surprising that records like that are still listened to. You know? I think that's like why I use the equipment I use, like the Moogs and the Rolands and Wurlitzers and Hammond organs, just because there's a certain sound from that stuff you can't get from the modern stuff. And if you want to do that type of sound and you want to perform live and you're a keyboardist, you're kind of like, you got to use a real keyboard.
100%.
So, you know, it's like a guy with a Fender, you got to use a real Fender, or you got to use a Stratocaster or a Les Paul. There's no substitute for like a really good guitar. So I think that's what some of the folks, if they do everything in a box and then they wonder why the next year nobody wants to hear that box, it's kind of like software. It gets obsolete.
It
moves
on.
So, but if you wanted to do something classic, then maybe if you use a Moog or a Wurlitzer or a Steinway or Fender, you know, you're going to hear something that maybe is going to last longer.
Definitely.
But I enjoyed talking to you, and we're going to put all your links up, and these will start to come out tonight. I'll send you them as they come out, and I'll push you on
so much.
Our social media. We push all the artists that we talk to on our social media accounts, and we have a bunch of different accounts on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Blogger and Anchor itself. So thank you for coming on the show. If when your EP comes out, we'll talk to you. Let us know when it comes out. We can have another show.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Eleni C, everybody.
Bye.
Eleni C. Make sure you listen to her, download, buy everything she sells on her site, and download and purchase her songs, not just stream them. That's always cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.